Good evening. It's an honor to have here the pastor and his wife and the mayor. Really a pleasure to have you here. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Mermelstein. I was born in Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia before the war was a free democratic country, very similar to the United States, until 1938, when Czechoslovakia was occupied by the Germans. And in 1939, World War II broke out. And usually I ask the students, which they told me they took history and the Holocaust, how many countries Germany occupied, or how many they could name. Well, not too many. So I name them the countries. That's number one. Number two, the state that I lived in was called the Carpathian Mountains. And we were occupied in 1939 by the Hungarians. The Hungarian government was a fascist government, and they followed the Nuremberg laws. January 30th, 1933 through May 8th, 1945. The Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazis between 1933 and 1945 was one of the most heinous events in recorded human history. 6 million Jews were murdered, over 1 million of whom were children, killed only because they were Jews. Millions of theirs were killed because various ways. They did not fit the Nazi ideal. 2/3 of the Jewish population in Europe was murdered, and entire once vibrant culture erased from the face of this earth. Not all Jews were victims, but all Jews were victims. 10 million Christians, 1,900 Catholic priests were murdered, raped, burned, starved, beaten, experimented upon, and humiliated while the German population looked the other way. January the 30th, 1933, the Nazi Party assumed power in Germany, and Hitler was appointed chancellor. Hitler ended the German democracy and basic rights, such as freedom of speech, press, and assembly. He established a brutal dictatorship. The Nazi Party believed and said that the blonde, blue-eyed type were the pure Aryan race, and that the rest were subhuman and they have to be dealt with, such as the Jews, Gypsies, Seven-Day Adventures, and so on. And usually I ask the students too, and I think I asked some of the people that I was this afternoon, who were the first people that were killed in Germany? Well, the students, they read books about it, but evidently that thing was left out. And it was the handicapped, from babies to grandparents. 70,000 handicapped people were killed only because they were handicapped by doctors, by nuns, and the hospitals, while again, the German population looked the other way. April 1st, 1933, a boycott of Jewish-owned businesses started, followed by the Nuremberg laws, which meant that a Jew could not be a professional. 1938, followed by Kristallnacht, where the Nazi Party sent all their members to break all the windows that were owned by Jews, and 1,000 synagogues were burned, while the fire department went out to make sure that the homes next door will not burn. In 1939, 1941, the killing started I don't know if you went through the exhibits and saw a sign, Babi Yar in the Ukraine, where they lined up men, women, told them to undress. If they had babies, they told them to pick up the babies, and they were shot, and they fell into a ravine. In 2 days, they killed 34,000 people. January the 20th, 1942, Heinrich, the head of the Gestapo, came to observe the killing, and he said that it's too slow and that it left too much evidence. He went back to Berlin and called for a conference in a town called Wannsee. I showed that on the sign there. He invited 14 people. Out of the 14, 8 of them had PhDs. The rest were doctors, architects, and chemists. And that's when they decided what they called the final solution of the Jewish problem. And they started to build the gas chambers and the crematoriums. The 3 death camps in Poland, Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka. Anybody that went to Majdanek and Treblinka did not have a chance. In Majdanek, they killed 800,000 people. Auschwitz was the biggest death camp of them all, but that was for different purposes too. Killing was number 1. Number 2, for experimenting, especially on twins. They wanted to find out how and why twins are born, because they wanted the German population to grow. And to see if they could change the color of the eyes, that all the German babies should be born with blue eyes, blonde hair and blue eyes, and men and women for different purposes. For one, that I know for sure, because I was told by somebody that went through those experiments, and I happen to know 2 people, a man and a woman. The man is a good friend. He lives on Miami Beach, and the woman lives in Century Village, Pembroke Pines. They took a man, put him on ice water, to see how long he would live, because they wanted to know, because they knew they're going to invade Russia, and in the winter in Russia it gets very cold. And other experimenting for doctor purposes, where Dr. Mengele was in charge. In 1939 through 44, I had to wear the yellow Star of David. And I was 13 years old. I couldn't go to school because I was Jewish. One morning, just woke up and I couldn't play with my friends because they were told not to play with us because we are Jews. In 42, one day, 2 policemen, Hungarians and a German policeman, came in, and they said, "We've taken your business and half of the house." We were a large family, 5 brothers, a sister, parents, grandparents, and I'm the only one that survived. And they said, "You'll move to the back of the house." And there were 2 cabinets there. They said, "What is in there?" They opened up, and they saw silver cups, silverware, and fine china, and they took all that stuff away. Then they went to all the Jewish homes and took all the valuable stuff, art, Persian carpet, fine china, silver, gold, whatever they could find. And they kept that till 1944, when the Russians were approaching the capital of Hungary, Budapest. They didn't want it should fall into the Russians, so they got a train of 24 carloads and filled it up with slave laborers and send it. Hopefully they were going to send it to Switzerland, but by the time the train got to Austria, the American army was there and they took control over it. And we didn't know about that until 1999. We knew there was a train because the slave laborers loaded it And when we came home from the camps, they asked if we know what happened to the train. Well, we didn't know till 1999, when President Clinton had a news conference criticizing the European countries, not giving back the stolen property, and one reporter asked, "How about the United States, Mr. President?" He says, "What do you mean the United States? What happened to the gold train?" He says, "We're going to find out." And he appointed a commission, and it didn't take them long, and they found out that all the papers are in Virginia in a warehouse. And I went to my attorney that helped us survivors, pro bono, and I told him, "Did you read about that gold train?" He says he saw it, but I said, "Some of that gold could be mine." So he checked with some attorneys in Washington, and they knew about it. And he said, "Shall I ask for the papers in your name? The Freedom of Information papers?" I said, "Sure." So he sent a letter to the Justice Department, and they wrote back, "No, we're not giving you the papers because statute of limitation, and nobody asked for that for 60 years. So we said, how can we ask for something that we didn't know about? But it didn't help. So we went to a court in Miami. We told the judge, and she summoned the Justice Department. They came down and they argued the same thing, and she didn't agree with them. She ordered them to give us the paper, and they appealed it and lost. So finally they told us where the boxes of papers were. So the lawyer sent some people, and they got all the requisitions that when the gold train got to Germany and the American army got a hold of it, took it to the PX, and the officers needed some of that for the girlfriends. So they gave out a lot. Some of it was auctioned off, and some disappeared. So we wanted an apology, and we wanted some compensation so we could give some of the needy survivors. So going through courts and mediation, and we settled for an apology and $25 million. I told the judge, "Your Honor, it's not about money, because I myself and the 6 survivors that were there in court, of which some of them were veterans in the Korean War, we will not get a penny of it, and we don't like nobody else to get any for servicing or handling this, only for the needy survivor." And that's how it was for 5 years. And we signed off on every application, so we knew every penny that came to Miami went to those needy survivors. And the Hungarian government saw what we did for the survivors, not only in the United States, all over the world, and they matched it for another 5 years. So we're getting some money now, and nobody's getting cash. We just pay for their medicine or food. We buy credit cards from a taxi company, and they use only for doctors or shopping. So that's how that ended. This was going on till 1944. In April, when the Nazi Party took over in Hungary, and the next day they arrested us. They gave us 2 hours to pack. And when they went from house to house and took us to the train, and from there they took us to a ghetto. A ghetto there is not like we know of a ghetto here, where an ethnic group lives together. Ghetto there, the smaller ones had wire fences around, and the larger ones had brick walls built around where nobody could come in and nobody could go out. The only way out was in the big ones, like the Warsaw Ghetto. They went through the sewers out and to get something from the city, whether it was to buy some food, or before the uprising, they sent out somebody to buy a few handguns, and the Warsaw Uprising was at that time. And it took Germany longer to defeat 200 survivors that started the uprising than it took them to take France or any country in Europe. They had to bring from the front artillery, tanks, and planes. But for that they had So they took us to the ghetto. Then when they had the whole county, they took us to the train, those cattle cars, filled up the wagon, close to 100 people, and put in 2 buckets. A bucket of water to the right and an empty bucket for facilities. And the doors were locked. There was not enough room to sit down for everybody, so we let the older people and the pregnant women sit down. And you can imagine having 100 people, and after a while they had to use that bucket for the facilities. Not only the smell, but the feeling of have to do that. The train ride lasted 2 days and a night, and we didn't know where we're going. We didn't know what to take along, so he said, take as much as you could carry. Everybody has to carry their own. So the train stopped. They picked up a young man. There was a little window, those cattle cars, and he read off the name Auschwitz, in Polish for Auschwitz. Then the train proceeded for another 15 minutes into the camp Auschwitz number 2 called Birkenau. The train stopped, they opened the doors, and they had their Gestapo and SS with dogs, sticks. Leave everything there, all the packages, everything will follow you. Well, that was the last time we saw them. Lined up men and boys to the right, women and children to the left, and I think I said nobody knew about Auschwitz or Majdanek or Treblinka in Europe. They said resettlement. When we lined up on the right side behind the fence, what we saw of Auschwitz were old people with canes and young children walking around, and a band was playing Jewish music. That's what we saw of Auschwitz. And the sign that said, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. And then we started to walk towards the front, and there was a Dr. Mengele. At that time, we didn't know who it was. And as you came to the front, he looked at you, had on white gloves and a little stick, didn't talk, just motioned to the right or left. And when my line came next, I saw my 2 oldest brothers went to the right, and my parents, 2 brothers and a sister, went to the left. I was 15 years old then, so I stopped for a second. I didn't know what to do. And I was lucky in a way. I saw the SS guy come with a stick because I stopped. So let's say like Mengele was standing here, and I just ran by him and to the right. Now, I can't say that I was smart. I can't say that I knew, because we didn't know the difference at that time. So I just ran to the right, and a cop was standing there, and he says to me, how old are you? I said, 15. He says, no, tell him 17. Tell him 17, stretch out, look tall, and pinch yourself, and left. Well, I had about 25 feet to walk where my brothers were, so I had to figure out what that meant. So when I came to my brothers, I went in between my 2 brothers, and I stepped on their shoes to look tall, and I pinched myself. Later, the next day, when we met people there, I found out why. They wanted me to look tall and pinch myself to look healthy, red face, because they did not take any young ones like myself to the right. Those people went to the right, went to work, and those people that went to left walked to their death. Then they took us into a barrack, and they cut our hair. Went into the next room. They told us to undress, fold your clothes nice, leave it there. You'll get it later. Again, that was the last time we saw them. Take only your shoes and go through the showers. took the shoes, went through the showers, came out, and they gave us a new wardrobe. Those striped clothes. They gave us a cap, a shirt, and a pair of pants. Let me say it again. They gave us a cap, a shirt, and a pair of pants. I tried to put on the pair of pants. I could have taken in 2 more guys like myself. So I ran around and I hollered, anybody needs a larger size? So I kept trading till the whistle blew and I had to line up, so I just put them on and wrapped them around twice. There was the commander from the camp. He says, I'm here to welcome you to the most deadliest and the most efficient death camps of them all. You came in, you saw the sign, Arbeit macht frei. Don't believe it. You're here to die. You're just waiting your turn. If I don't like the way you look at me, he goes like this, and I'll shoot you. If you step out of line, I'll shoot you. And if you say something that I don't like, I'll shoot you. And I don't have to account to nobody. And left. The capo told us to come into the barrack. And we came in, and on the right side, from one end of the wall to the other end, there were 3 tiers of boards. And there were blankets there. He said, wherever there's a blanket, you're going to sleep, and that's going to be your bed. People started to ask him, can you tell us, when can we see our parents? Others hollered, how about our sisters? Where are they going to be? And they kept hollering for about, I don't know, a half a minute, and he didn't answer nothing. Then he says, I want all of you to come to the door. We came to the door. He opened up the door. He says, you see the chimneys? You see the smoke? There are no parents or brothers and sisters, so you wouldn't have to ask. We didn't know how to make it out, what to think of that. What does that mean? But after being there a day, we really found out what Auschwitz was like. Because when we came in, they locked up the people that were there. We couldn't see nobody, we couldn't talk to nobody that day. And the next day, we really found out what Auschwitz was all about. Some people couldn't take it. They ran over to the wires, touched them, and killed themselves. My oldest brother took the 2 of us, and he made us promise that we would never do anything to help the Germans to accomplish what they want to. He said, we will have to survive. We will have to do anything and everything and never give up hope. And then a week later, one morning, roll call, we came out. There was 1 truck on one side, 1 truck on the other side. And they said, you guys to this truck, and you guys to that truck. And I was separated from my older brother. So I had 1. And they sent us to another camp, a work camp. We came there, also wire fences, towers, soldiers with dogs walking around. Every morning, before we went out to work, there was roll call and they counted. At night when we came in, they counted, and if they made a mistake, 40,000 people, we had to stay on the knees till they recounted and recounted until they accounted for everybody again. And our work was to extend the railroad tracks. And people were taking turns to use the tools. It came my turn to use a jackhammer. And I tried to pick it up, and it was so heavy I couldn't pick it up. But I knew I had to do something, otherwise I wouldn't be around. So I took the jackhammer, the 2 handles, and I watched. The guard walked in the back of us. So I watched with one eye to see where he is. And as he walked, I turned a little bit always. Made sure that he don't see the front, he only sees my back. Squeeze the handles, it makes you shake. So that's what I was doing, squeezing the handles and shaking. And he couldn't see in the bottom, so I got by like that a couple of days. Then we had to carry the tracks from the truck to the place. Again, me, 50-year-old small kid, skinny, had to, next to man, 5'8", 6-footers. I could barely reach the tracks with my hand like this. So, and then there were two older German civilians in charge of the project. One walked with a cane, and the other one was an elderly person. And I spoke German, and I walked over to him, and I said, "Your boots are dirty, and I could clean them for you nice." So he took me into the trailer, 7:30, and I cleaned till 11 o'clock. Then they sent me to get their lunch, and there was a little bit always left. And on the shirt we had numbers, the big numbers. They took our names away in Auschwitz. But he never called me by the number. He gave me a nickname, and he called me by that. And about 2 months later, one morning I woke up, I had a temperature. Well, nobody wanted to say that they were sick, because if you said you were sick, you had to step out, and then they took you what they called a hospital. But we knew it wasn't a hospital because we never saw anybody come back. But on the way home from work, I collapsed, and they dragged me in and put me in a hospital. You came into the hospital, they took away all your clothes, shoes, they just gave you a shirt. And we never saw a German civilian, not in the camps, but even close to the camps. And one morning, I heard a knock on the floor, because the floors were wood, and he had a cane with an iron thing on the bottom, and it sounded like he was calling, but I couldn't make it out, and it got closer and closer. And I take a look, I wasn't allowed to get off the bed, so I just looked up like this, and here he comes to the door with the camp commander. And he says, "Get out, I need you at work." I looked at the commander, then he says, "Go get your clothes." The warehouse was right in the end of by the building. So I ran out, got a shirt and a pants and a pair of shoes. Didn't look at the size, forget about the color. Just put them on and went out to work. Then people were going to get cement to the big camp called Gross Rosen. There was a big railroad station there, and they went to get cement. And they came back and they said that they met family, they met friends from their hometown. So I walked over to that German and I told him that I would like to go tomorrow on that transport because people came back and they found family. Maybe I would find my brother there. So he took me over to the guard and he said he's going to go tomorrow on the transport. Give him 2 minutes to look for his brother. So we went the next day, the truck backed into the wagon, and we got off, and as I came close to the wagon, my brother brought the cement to the door, and that's where I saw him for about a minute, and that was the last time. And then we worked there. That was April, May till October. We came back from work one day, and all of a sudden we heard shooting, planes flying. We looked up, we saw the Russian planes. And the Russian planes, we could tell, we didn't have to see the red insignia. You could hear the noise, because the American planes used to come fly high, and then the jets used to come down and like that. But the Russians, they made more noise than anything. And after locked us in the barracks, how many days we didn't know because it was dark in the barracks day and night and we didn't know what's going on. We didn't have any news of any kind. So after we figured a couple of days, we started the Dead March. Marching day and night, we met from other camps people. No food, no water, no rest. A lot of people were dying. And those that couldn't walk fell down, those they shot, until we got to a big farm, and they took some food from the farmer and gave us. Then they took us to a train wagon, like they usually carry rocks in no top. And it was raining, snowing, the end of October, and Europe gets cold. And remember, all I had that one shirt and one pants, and I got wet. Till we came to a camp called Mauthausen. Late in the afternoon, we stayed on that truck till the next afternoon. Then they sent us to a sub-camp called Ebensee in the Tyrol Mountains. And we worked in the tunnels. And I was lucky again. I got a good job. On a little train, I was hooking up the wagons and unhooking them. So I was able to get to the locomotive, and the locomotive was going on with coal. And I was able to steal coal, and I was eating, and if I was able to steal more than 2 or 3, so I gave it to my friends. And we found out that it was a good medicine too. Any doctors here? Because some people had diarrhea, and it stopped the diarrhea. So we always try to save one in case somebody had, because if he had diarrhea, he couldn't run to the bathroom every few minutes, and it was anyway, so yeah, I was lucky because that's what I was eating. The food they gave you, what they gave us breakfast in the morning, a black cup of coffee. At noon, a soup. We were lucky to find the potato peels in there. And at night, a slice of bread. I don't know what kind of bread it was, black gooey stuff with a cup of coffee. So the coal was the only thing we found that we could eat, so we ate it. It was the dessert. That's my wife. By the way, she was also in Auschwitz, and something else happened to her. So anyway, one day I showed the guy how to stop, and he didn't stop. And I was hooking up the wagons, and my hand got smashed. So I finished the day with a couple of fingers, and overnight I woke up in the morning, and my hand was swollen, and I couldn't move it like this. So they put you in the hospital. The hospital consisted of 3 rooms, a barrack. When you first came in, they had bunk beds, 4 people in a single bed, on the bottom, 4 on top, and 2 under the bed. Until somebody died, then we took the body out and we went into the bed. And as the people were dying in the 3rd room, or if they needed space, they took the last row and just threw them out alive. Because at nights, many times we heard the crying and roaming outside. So they didn't hardly fed us at all. And after being there, we didn't know what day it was anyway, but we estimated after a month or so, I became a skeleton. And I got into the 2nd room. When I got into the middle of the 2nd room, we started to count how many days we have left. So we started with 15 days, got down to the door to the 3rd room. We came down to 10 days. But one morning, we woke up in the morning and there were no guards. So after a while, people that could walk from the 1st room went outside, and they came in singing and hollering, "There are no Germans, the gates are open, let's go out." Well, I was already a skeleton. I couldn't pick up my legs or my arms. So my brother's friends were there. They were 2 years older than me. We rolled off the bed, and with our fingers and feet pushed ourselves to get outside. And we came outside, and the first thing we saw was the American flag on the tanks. Well, I cannot tell you the feelings to see an American flag. And the tanks came closer, and they were throwing candy and chocolate, and the 3 of us couldn't catch nothing. Behind them was the infantry, and there was a doctor from Boston and he stopped the soldiers from throwing food. We didn't understand what he said, but we saw he was going like this, so, and they stopped throwing, so we know he told them not to throw us some food. Because a lot of people were eating those cans, meat and stuff, and a lot of people died like that after the war, and other camps too, that I heard. So then a soldier came and picked me up, and this doctor started a field hospital right there on the grounds with the cuts. And I came there, and they had those plastic pipes already, a shower. How many months? The last time I had a shower, I don't remember. I didn't remember. And they fed us every hour, on the hour, 24 hours a day with vitamins, because the teeth was loose. And after a month, I was able to start walking. Then, about 2 weeks later, they took us back to Czechoslovakia. Every country came for their citizens, because there were people there from a lot of different countries. I couldn't name them all. But nobody came for us. So we went back. The American Army took us back to Czechoslovakia, and there we took a train to go home to the state where I came from, the Carpathian. The trains were jam-packed, so the younger ones, we climbed up on the roof of the train. We were only hoping that it wouldn't make a sharp turn, we shouldn't slide down. But we made it back home, and hoping that I would find somebody, and came home, didn't find nobody. And in the house lived a family, but they gave me a room, and I slept there. But in the morning I went through, and I couldn't stay in the house, so I took a train to the next town to see if my cousin came home. And he came home, and he said, lunchtime we'll go to the kitchen. I said, what do you mean kitchen? He said, yeah, there is a soup kitchen. Money came from the United States, from the Jewish federations. So people from all the little towns used to get together there. And on the way home, as soon as we left the camp, wherever we met a survivor, we had 3 questions. Today, 60-some years later, we still have the same 3 questions when we meet survivors. Where are you from? What camps were you in? Do you know anybody from my town? And there were 2 young ladies working in the kitchen there, helping out. But being my age, and they were a little younger, they didn't look at us. But I looked at them with one eye. And after a while, things didn't look so good. A lot of people were leaving. And I wasn't quite 17 then, didn't know where to go. I knew I had an uncle and an aunt in the United States, but no address, nothing. So I stayed. One morning we wake up, and an announcement comes out. They give everybody a piece of paper. And I look at the paper. Number 1, you can't leave town without a permit. Number 2, we're going to change the money to Russian money. Everybody gets 200 Russian ruble, like let's say $200, no matter how much money you have, and so on and so on. And while the announcement came out, in marched in a platoon policemen with assigned police, behind them assigned teachers, and behind the teachers a mayor. So I went in to change the money, and on the way out I saw a clerk in the next room, so I went in there. I said, I would like to get a permit to go to the next town. He says, why do you want to go there? I says, I want to see my cousin. Who else you going to see? What are you going to talk about? So, but we found out from the elderly people right away how things work in Russia. So I went in my pocket, and I took out a $50 bill, and I put it on his desk. He looked around, didn't see nobody, put it in his pocket, made me the paper, put the seal on, and gives it to me. So I put it in my pocket. I take out another 50, and I put it on his desk. And I says, now make me one that I'm a Czech citizen. All your papers in your desk are still Czech papers. So he made me one. So I thought I had it made. I said, in the morning, I'm going to take the train and go to the border. Took the train, got to the border town. We got off the train. There was a line to get in. There was a Russian officer there. Give him the paper. He looks at it, tears it up, and throws it away. I said, what are you doing? I want to go home. And you could see the next town, maybe a mile or two the most. He says, you see the wagon? If you don't leave here in 30 seconds, I'm going to lock you up and you'll go to Siberia. So I left, and then I said, what am I going to do now? So thinking a while, then I said, I'll wait till it gets dark, and I'll walk way out of town, and I'll just go by the fields and sneak across. Got dark, I walked for about a half an hour, and all of a sudden the dogs started to bark, and the searchlights came on, and I was arrested by the border police. He didn't say nothing, just took me to the station, locked me up there in a cellar. Then he brought two other guys. In the morning, they took us to the headquarters. 6 MKVD with machine guns marched 3 kids to the headquarters. We came there, came into the room. There was a Russian officer sitting at a table, looking at papers. And I looked at him, and he had 5 gold stars. So I said, 5 gold stars, he must be a high officer. And how can I use that to my advantage? So I figured I will use it. So then he put the papers down, and a soldier came and read off the charges. Charged me with carrying Russian money across, with espionage, and committing treason. And that officer looked at me, he says, what do you have to say? I says, I don't know anything about it. I says, Russian money? Yes, I had in my pocket. Last month, everybody got Russian money. It was changed. Espionage, treason, I don't even know what it meant. He says, what are you doing here? I says, I'm on my way home from Auschwitz. And I said Auschwitz because that was the first camp the Russian army liberated, and that was the biggest one. So I figured if he is such a high officer, he probably would know. So he says, what did you say? I says, I'm on my way home from Auschwitz. He says, the camp? I said, yeah. So he says, what are you doing here? I says, on my way home, I'm looking for family. He says, what were you doing in the field? I said, it got dark and I got lost. So he looked at me again and he says, go home, go straight home, don't let me ever see you here again. Well, I left in a hurry because I knew what Siberia is, and no trial either in Russia. So I went home, and my oldest brother's friends, one couple was getting married, and one couple was getting engaged. And right after the ceremony, they were talking of trying to escape. So I said, how do you want to do that? Where do you want to go? He says, well, take the train and go to the border and try to sneak through the fields. I said, oh, no, we're not going there. So we decided to go to the capital and see if we could buy our way out. So the next morning we took a bus to the capital. We came there after lunch, and we looked in the streets, and we have to find some people that we could trust in a strange city, because we found out you can't trust nothing in Russia. So we decided that the 3 men will walk around, and if you see a face that you think is Jewish, go by there and just say, do you speak Jewish, in Jewish? If he is a Jewish man, he would understand and he would answer. If not, walk away. We found 2 persons, but one just moved in and the other one says, it's so strict, nothing could be done here. So we walk away, and all of a sudden we see a man is following us. So we got scared. We thought it would be a secret policeman, but he runs over to me and tapped me on the shoulders, and he says, I think I know you. So I turned around. He says, aren't you David? I said, yeah. He said, remember in Ebensee in the camp in the hospital when the person next to you died and you told me, we took the body out and I came into the bed. So he took us home. He had 2 rooms, gave us a room, and we told him why we came. So he went in. He says, I'm going into town to see what I could find out. He came back and he says, nothing could be done here, but if you go to the border, it's not the same border. There is one Jewish man, a baker, that came home. In a town there used to be 200 people, one man came back. And he is the only one could help you. So in the morning we took the bus. He said you wouldn't have to look for the bakery. The bus stopped by the railroad station. The bakery is right across the street. So we got off the bus, went into the bakery, and we told the man we would like to speak to him private. So we went into a room and we told him why we came. And he begged us not to do it. He said the railroad tracks is the border. Nobody could cross the railroad tracks. The only way out, the other way, is to go through the Carpathian Mountains. But you don't know where the soldiers are, and they have orders to shoot. So the couple that knew me well says, you're the single guy, what do you say? I said, we came this far, I would say, let's go. If they catch me, at least I know that I tried. If they shoot me, nobody will shed a tear. But if we make it, we know we'll have a life. So we decided to go. We asked the man if he could go and find a man that he could trust and will pay him. He should help us get across. So he went out, came back. He says, I found one man, but he don't want Russian money. He don't want, there were other monies around. He only wanted, what kind of money you think? American dollars. Well, that wasn't easy, but to our luck, the couple that was married, when she came home, she knew that her father buried a small can by the apple tree. Excuse me. She found that can, what was in there? A gold watch, 2 rings, and $5. And the $5 took the 5 of us across. Today, that couple lives in Century Village, Pembroke Pine, that's close to Miami. And I see him on and off, and she only asked me for the interest, not the dollar. So I said, interest is very low now, wait till it goes up. She says, when it was up, you said it was too high, wait till it goes down. So we still have a good laugh. The other couple, unfortunately, they both passed away. So I made it back to Czechoslovakia, and there, like I said, we met a survivor. We asked, do you know anybody? So one man knew that my uncle was in this city. So I went there, and I stayed there a week in Czechoslovakia, and I didn't like the situation, too many Russians. And I was afraid because I saw what happened once, and I sure didn't want to be there if it happens again. So they had Jewish people that knew their way from Czechoslovakia just to cross the border to Germany. And we knew that there were displaced person camps there. Under the UNRWA, that's the United Nations organization, the American Army was in charge. So we wanted to be on the American side. So we crossed the border, and they had 150 children that they got together in Czechoslovakia and took us to Germany. There they took us in a home. And I just showed Carol and Connie the picture of that Exodus ship, and the 150 friends were on that ship. People wanted to go anywhere, no matter what country, but none of the countries wanted to take in what they call the refugees. They wanted to go to Palestine. There was no Israel at that time, but England didn't let them go. they were catching those ships and taking them to Cyprus into camps. But that didn't stop us from trying to go. Then they started to take children to different countries. Canada, England, the United States, every day a different country. One day they said, tomorrow they're going to register to the United States. So 60 of us registered, and they took 20. And I was one of the lucky 20. Came to the United States, March 14th, 1947, on a Liberty ship. There were no cuts, no beds. It was those nets, and we were just going like this. But it was good. And we got to breakfast the first day in the morning. The tables were set. We looked, food on the tables, and there were grapefruits there. The only thing we didn't know what to do with them. We never saw a grapefruit. Anyway, we made it. The trip took 7 days. They gave us $5 when we got on the ship. So I spent $1 in 7 days, and that hurt. And they found my aunt and uncle before we got on the boat. They asked if we have family. So my uncle's name I knew because it was the same name as mine, but I didn't know where he lived. My aunt, I knew only the last name. I guess my uncle was easy to find, David Mermelstein, and there was only one David Mermelstein in Rhode Island. So he must have told them my aunt, and they met me at the boat, lived in Brooklyn, 6 months, went to night school. Then my uncle sent me tickets to West Warwick. So I stayed there a year, started to work there. And I asked the students if they would know how much the minimum wage was in 1947. Nobody guessed. 40 cents. And I tried to save money, but I couldn't go to the bank with $2 a week. So they were selling saving bonds, but they were $18. So they sold stamps. You filled up a booklet, and then you got the bond. I stayed there a year. Then a friend of mine called me from New Jersey. Things are good there. So I went there, a town called Clifton, worked in Passaic, spent the weekends in Brooklyn. I found that same cousin that I went to see, and another cousin. And cousins in Europe were very close, not like here, sorry to say. Well, still, but cousins. Well, even before the war, I used to walk 4 miles to the next town just to spend a day with them. And anyway, and I used to come down Friday night and spend Saturday with my friends. And one Saturday, my friend says, "What are you doing this afternoon?" Saturday afternoon. I said, "What do we do Saturday afternoon? We wait for Saturday night." He says, "Well, I'm going to an old age home to see an old man, a sick man from his hometown. My mother came from that town, and he knew her, and he would like to see me." So I said, "Sure." In Europe, anyway, it was a custom Saturday afternoon. You went to see family or friends. So if somebody's in the hospital, even today, usually the rabbis will go visit them and people will go. So I went, and by then we knew how to read and write, and we used to read the letters that he was getting from England. And about a month later, a letter comes with a picture in there. And one of those two girls I met on the way to Germany in a displaced person camp. But she didn't know what happened to her friend. So a letter comes, and there is a picture. And they give the picture to that old man. He says, "Oh, that's my niece." So then I look at the picture, and I said, "Oh, my God, that's the other girl that worked in the kitchen. She went to England." And I went to Germany and came to the United States. And a month later or so, she writes that she has 2 uncles in Miami, and she has 1 uncle in the Bronx, and she is going to come and stay with him in the Bronx. And she wrote him the address and telephone number. And what did I do? I wrote down the telephone number. She came on a Thursday. I called Friday morning. And, and I didn't call for a date, because if she says no the first time, then you're finished. I just told her. So I called up, I says, look, I told her who I was, but she said she didn't remember me. She only looked with one eye anyway. And so I told her, though, that I went last Saturday, I saw her uncle in the home, and she lived in the Bronx, and the uncle was in Brooklyn. I says, I'm going there, and if you would like, I'll come and get you and take you there. Now that she couldn't refuse. She came, and after the visit, I said, let's have a snack. We had that, and I said, it's still time to go to the movies before I take you back. So she didn't know, but that was our first date. Oh, yeah. I said, how will we go? I said, we'll take the subway. She says, we'll take the underground. I said, no, there's no undergrounds in the United States. So the following week, I did the same thing for another few weeks. And then we got rid of the third friend, just the two of us. A year later, we got married, and we were going to go to Lakewood for our honeymoon, but it snowed all night and nothing moved. And her uncle says, why don't you come to Miami Beach for a honeymoon? Everybody comes to Miami Beach. Nobody told us about North Carolina. So we went to Miami Beach, and after, I think, 3 days, I said, Irene, this is heaven. I don't think we're going back. And then her uncles came, picked us up for supper, brought us to the house, and he says, so what are you guys going to do? I said, well, next week we'll go back. He says, what do you have there? I said, I have a good job there. He says, a job you could get here. I said, okay. Called up my cousin, says, take out the few things that you can. The rent is paid for the month. Tell the landlady we're not coming back. We went back the following July, got a few things. And that was 60 years ago. I want you to meet my wife, Irene. $60. And another few months, if she'll keep me, will be 61. 8 years ago, I retired, and I'm busier now than I was when I worked. By number one, going on the March of the Living 6 times, but it took us 4 years before we could say, yes, we're going back, what we call the biggest Jewish cemetery in the world. But I went back 6 times because we saw what it did to the children. So we decided to go. So last year was my 6th time. Connie asked me, you asked me if I'm going next year. So I looked up, I asked, but I didn't get the answer yet. And I'm a volunteer in the Holocaust Memorial on the beach, also on the board, on the Holocaust Memorial, on the board for the March of the Living, and on the advisory board to the Jewish Family Service, that we have 4 caseworkers that devote their time to those needy 400 survivors. And there is a claims conference in New York that they are the ones that negotiate with Germany and get some money from Germany, and they distribute it all over the world. So I'm on the advisory board there too, so I make sure that we in Florida get our share. In 1964, I believe it was, a professor in California wrote a book, and he said that it didn't happen. And he went on a public radio, and he says anybody that could prove it to him, he would give him $40,000. Well, $40,000 then was a lot of money. It didn't take long, survivors called in, and he didn't want to pay. So one of the survivors, by the name of Mermelstein, I met him a year before. We come from the same area, but we don't know if we're family or not because there's nobody to ask. He took him to court, and the guy lost, and he appealed. It went to the California Supreme Court. So we said, well, wait a minute. If they're going to say it didn't happen and we are here, what's going to be in a few years? So we started to speak up. Me and about 3 other survivors went to Tallahassee, met with the governor and the education commissioner, and we told them some states passed a law that it's mandatory to teach the Holocaust. If you would do it, we survivors would do the teaching at no cost to the state. Well, they jumped on it, passed the law, so we go to schools, middle schools, high school, universities, and wherever school calls, Catholic school, Seventh-day Adventures, any school that calls, we go. University of Miami has a seminar for teachers, and I go to the school to talk to, and they started a program where they have a course, so they assign a student to a survivor. So this year we had 50 students to 50 survivors for a semester. My wife was lucky enough, she had 2 girls. So they come to the house, the girls. Me and the boy, we meet at a ball game. We meet at the food court. And in the house too, and we talk about it. So that's what keeps me busy. And I would like to leave you with 2 things. What I tell the children usually, that this country gives you something that no other country in the world gives you, and don't tell me it's freedom, because that you take for granted. But I said it gives you an opportunity to be and do what you want. You're in high school, every one of you has a chance to go to school today. Get your education. Hate, prejudiced, you hear it, you see it. Don't sit idle by. Try and stop it. And and I tell them, I speak to you today for my past, and I don't want it to be your future. Thank you for listening.